So it is my pleasure, and can you all join me as we welcome Dr. J. Herbert Nelson II.
First, giving thanks and honor to God for this privilege to be here and to have an opportunity to be among Presbyterians this afternoon. It is also with extreme gratitude for the hospitality that has been shown as I've had an opportunity to hang out with some of the leaders of this presbytery and also now to hang out with some leaders of another presbytery. And also the opportunity to just kind of go to a ball game last night and watch the Rockies win 16-0. I tell you, that's something else. I hope you make it to the playoffs. That's the best I can say. Yeah. But also to discuss the life of our denomination, to be challenged in a sense by what you are thinking and how much of this struggle in this period of history for Christendom, not just the Presbyterian Church USA, and how that captures the essence of our thinking, particularly those of us who are leaders in the denomination. I am here today to really take an opportunity to share with you some of what we are dealing with in our denominational structure today, and hopefully to hear some of what you may be hearing as well and thinking, and what questions may be pertinent to where you are in the life of the denomination. I want to, first of all, say that we are a denomination that is reforming. The Reformation that we experienced with John Calvin was an opportunity for the church to really think through what are the values of the church in the 21st century, and I think in that time in the 14th century, and wondering what we would really do as a church. With regards to the control that the Catholic Church, in a sense, and the Pope in particular, had over the denominational construct at that period of time. There were people like Zwingli and Calvin and Barron and others who spent time struggling with the issues of what it meant to become the church. Luther attacking his thesis on the door at the Church of Wittenberg was the beginning of that process that continued to emerge as a Protestant movement in the life of the world. That movement came to North America, and today we are with ecumenical partners and working with ecumenical partners who also share the same contextual history. I just came back from Leipzig, Germany, looking at the German part of the Reformation a few months ago. We spent time dealing with the World Communion of Reformed Churches and many of the global issues by which the church is faced with today. Interestingly enough, the World Communion of Reformed Churches has in the midst of it one of the great struggles today, the issue of inclusion of women preachers, and whether or not denominations in the World Communion of Reformed Churches will admit women to be ordained to preach the gospel. And the second part that was a major issue this year was the issue of LGBT inclusion. I'm so thankful that we've had a part of another Reformation, and we've gotten beyond those issues within this denomination, where it is, quote, legal in the life of our church to bring a woman pastor, to educate women pastors in our seminaries, with the understanding that churches are growing in their understanding and acceptance of what it means to be a woman pastor in this denomination. My wife started out with 4 churches pastoring down in eastern North Carolina. What is significant about that was every male that graduated out of our class only had 1 church. It was a very different time that women coming into the life of the church back in the mid-1980s had to struggle really with proving themselves on testing grounds, quite frankly, that men didn't have to deal with. And that was not necessarily a piece of racial dynamic. I met white women across this country that had to do the same. I met just the other day the first Native American woman who was ordained in this denomination who has never had an opportunity to pastor a church and is now going to retire. So we are still seeing the remnant of those challenges, but I will suggest today that we are much further along. And in inclusion, it is good to see women pastors that are moving into the ranks of high steeple churches, such as Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago, and I can name several others. I also believe that in the life of this church, during where we have come during the course of the Reformation, is a little bit more on the issues of racial inclusion in the life of our church. Surely the Confession of 67 opened the door for those possibilities, but I believe at this last assembly with Belhar, we spoke very poignantly to the issue of the church's complicity with the issues of race and racism in the United States. But speaking to that through a confession is quite different than engaging it. I turned on the television set just a couple of days ago, and St. Louis once again is exploding. It is interesting that we will be going to St. Louis for our General Assembly next year. And we've been raising the issue of what does it mean as a church to witness in St. Louis, a city that is still broken by a significant racial estrangement in this United States of America, and that is becoming more and more the representative of the continuation of racism in the United States, particularly systemic racism through the police department. We've had inquiries from persons across this country who have raised the issue, and across our denomination who've raised the issue with regards to the need to pull our General Assembly out of St. Louis. To do that right now, we've looked at the dollars. $1.2 million if we were to cancel our General Assembly right now in St. Louis. Contracts that we would have to pay for that we would not be able to use. And so we've been thinking through what it means now to go into St. Louis, as two other denominations will also be meeting in their summer meeting in St. Louis and their conventions in St. Louis. What does it mean to go in and be a viable witness? What does it mean to utilize the historic power and also to utilize the numbers that we have with regards to being the largest Protestant denomination and Reformed denomination right now in the Protestant faith to deal with the issues of speaking truth and love to power? What does it mean to have a General Assembly that focuses on the climate of St. Louis, as it raises questions with politicians in that particular area? We have a Washington office. We have an office at the United Nations as a denomination. In fact, two of the long-standing officers engaged in the political arena here in the United States are Presbyterian. And what does it mean to use not only that, but also the issues of the financial clout that we bring to the table, and to utilize that as a way by which to suggest that we're not leaving St. Louis barren, but we're coming to St. Louis for some serious business in this day and age. More than just to have a meeting, but to come hopefully to be a part of the process of the transformation of a city that is reeking with poverty and racism and brokenness in the life of that community. And so it means changing the context of a General Assembly. Is it just a meeting where we argue and vote over overtures? Or is it going to be a meeting where we're talking about some radical changes within the denomination to be able to go out and influence change in the larger society? In a time right now where we have refugees, or I should say where we have immigrants who have come to this particular country, and refugees, who have started Presbyterian churches and are yet under siege. I just left last week the Indonesian Presbyterian Church in New Hampshire. I went with a gentleman who was slated to be deported. The laws now have been so twisted with those individuals who have crossed the border and come into the United States. This particular gentleman, now with the exclusion of DACA and the struggle with that, we are finding that he was to be deported while his wife, his son, and his daughter remained here in the United States. He had to quit his job, at least he felt he did. And even against the advice of our own lawyers, he went ahead and did it. And now he is out of work. He was to go in after buying his plane ticket to his hearing, And after he came out of the hearing, they gave him 6 weeks to continue before another hearing would be held, which would be his third hearing on the issue of whether or not he could stay in this country. And what essentially the United States government is doing is they're actually running the time frame. It takes time to get people out of the country. It also takes money, and it takes communications with the country they come from as to whether they will accept them back. And so to get your own plane ticket is to cut the cost of transportation. You pay for your own transportation back home. To be able to deal with whether or not you are going to be allowed by your own government to come back, you have a waiting period. And so individuals are being called to come down every 60 to 30 days until that waiting period lapses. And then when that waiting period lapses, they are then deported. And this family will be left without a father and a husband. Many of them are seeking refuge in Canada, which is already flooded with individuals who have moved there since the beginning of the Trump administration and all of the threats that took place very early on in January in the airports, where people came with legal documents that they had been working on, legal documents from the United States government that they would become citizens that they had been working on for over a year. And they showed up in the airport, and ICE stopped them in the airport under an order of this president. And what does it mean when not only are these individuals, quote, refugees or immigrants, but what does it mean when they go by the name Presbyterian? When they were Presbyterians evangelized by our missionaries in world mission, the gospel was taught to them in their country, and now they have come to this country and started a Presbyterian church that is well over 250 members, of Indonesian Presbyterian church, of Indonesian Presbyterians. And what does it mean when the executive presbyter of that particular presbytery says, this is the most Presbyterian church in the entire presbytery? And what does it mean when they are under siege, moving from apartment to apartment to apartment, and in some instances from a dwelling place in one apartment to another dwelling place down the hall, so that if ICE were to come at 4 o'clock in the morning and raid and try to take them out, the address that they would have would be incorrect. You see, we are facing these kinds of challenges now as Presbyterians, not with other people, but we're facing these challenges with people who go by the name of Presbyterian. We're an extension of our work in our church and a part of our fold. And so the question of our privilege today, when it comes down to this type of systemic madness and evil, really is not about how do we take care of others. It's about how do we take care of our own. And how do we cross internally the historic boundaries that have separated us racially, have separated us with regards to gender, have separated us with regards to the issue of sexuality, have separated us with regards to the issue of learning how to deal with the otherness of the other, as Hans Rüdiger would have said. I think this is a key challenge for our denomination going forward. And I think it is going to be probably the most formidable battle across this country in the days to come, as it has already begun, and it is already poised and set to destroy families and to take opportunity away from those and to turn our backs on the credo that we placed upon the Statue of Liberty: give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masters who yearn to breathe free. We're now turning those words into the slave trade of Charleston and Virginia. We're turning those words of freedom now and turning our back on the very thing that we have promised as a nation, and it has brought so many of us to this country. I want to also suggest that another formidable struggle is to remain grounded in the faith and to understand what really a movement of faith means in this day and age. You see, God has a sense of humor. The same God that sees and oversees this world, that mixed up all of the races, and that has done a whole lot of things to put in the midst of us the challenge of really learning how to love each other, is the same God that has put our denomination in a place that if we do not learn how to evangelize people of color, we will be nothing more than a small sect in the years to come. The evangelism grounding right now in the United States of America is among people of color. We can no longer remain a 91% white church and grow into the future. It is numerically impossible, not just for us, but for all mainline Protestant denominations. We are seeing not only the immigrants who are coming in, but we have seen immigrants who have come in over the ages and over time, before all of these laws we are seeing today constructed. And so what does it mean for a 91% white church to learn how to evangelize communities of color in which there has only been marginal activity and engagement and relationship building over the years? And what does it mean for a church, a denomination, that has not really taken evangelism seriously because we've been afraid to tell our faith stories, because we've said those faith stories are private, because we've said our faith is private. And now we are being placed in a position where we have to share our faith and some of the intimacies of that in order to really be faithful to the gospel. I am convinced that this has always been the call of the gospel. The question has really been whether we have been open enough to that challenge to share our faith stories with others. You see, human dynamics have taught me over the years, and being in ministry now for 31 years, pastoring 2 churches, being in a national office, an off-site office, deployed in Washington, D.C. doing political work, and now in the national church office in 31-year period. I've come to understand that no matter how we live in the United States of America or around the globe, most of our stories are very similar. And they're similar because everybody in here has been sick. Everybody in here has had to sit around an open grave. Everybody in here has had some struggle in their life that has been embarrassing and you don't really want to talk about it. In fact, you purge it from your mind and don't even want to think about it anymore. And there are some people in here who have even come to the conclusion that it didn't happen. It really didn't happen. I don't want to remember it. I don't remember it. It's gone. But the reality is, it's at the depth of those particular stories in our life that actually are the grounding of how we do evangelism. Because it's to help people understand that we are not perfect people in the life of the church, nor have we had perfect lives. And the people who we are talking to are not perfect people, and they don't have perfect lives. And the only way folks can really feel comfortable coming into a holy house like this, with all of the stained glass and the cross and the candles and all dressed up on Sunday morning, is for us to somehow bring ourselves to a level by which we can have a conversation of the way by which we have gotten through and beyond the struggles of life. And I guarantee you, when you tell your story, if people are honest with themselves, somebody will jump up and say hallelujah, because that's their story too. That's their story too. But this whole idea that faith is private and we don't have to talk about it has a lot to do with our struggles with evangelism. I'm going to keep my faith to myself. When I went to Memphis, Tennessee to pastor, I wanted to move from that erudite, sophisticated congregation in North Carolina to go to a place where I could work with poor people. My father worked a lot with poor people growing up. He was, in a sense, my early mentor in ministry, Presbyterian pastor. During the Civil Rights Movement, I grew up during that period of time, As I was sharing with a group earlier today, at a time where 27 students at South Carolina State University and Claflin University were shot in the back by highway patrolmen in the state of South Carolina protesting Harry Floyd's bowling alley, trying to integrate it. Of those 27 students, 3 were killed. 1 was a high school student coming back to the campus to meet his mother after she got off from work as a matron on the campus. That has informed so much of my theology, so much of my justice, passion, and appeal, so much of who I am in ministry is around that period in the life that I've lived. But the part of that is that I became a Presbyterian pastor. In the African American, I became one of those, quote, elite pastors, as they called me, coming to the pastors' meeting, the interdenominational meeting. I'll never forget Reverend Ben Faust of the African Methodist Episcopal Church whenever I come in the meeting, and I was usually late to the meetings. And he would say to me, "There goes Nelson over there from that white church." And it became real interesting to deal with that. And then he would ask me a second, he said, "Well, where's that book you all carry?" And I said, "You're talking about the Bible? You know you all don't carry a Bible. You got that other book you use. That's your Bible." And I would have to hear this at every single meeting we had. But I also knew the great respect that Ben Faust had for the Presbyterian Church, for the rigor that we had to go through with regards to our studies, with the theology that we brought to the table, much of which he admitted he used as a part of his own teaching and preaching and training in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And for the Presbyterian pastors and our great sense of what it meant to not just be a preacher, but to be a preacher and a scholar. And how much he appreciated that, because he came out of a denomination where so many did not want to go through the rigor of studying and preparation. And what was really interesting in that I left that context, that college, 5 colleges and universities in Greensboro, North Carolina, erudite, sophisticated congregation, average education in their master's degree, money in the life of that church as well. And I left because of my involvement and engagement with poor people in public housing and the fighting and the rights of people, going back to Orangeburg, South Carolina, where my father was pastoring and state conference president, NAACP. All of that came up on me. There's something deeper you have to do. And I left, and no one understood it. You could have been there 20, 30 years and coasted in ministry. Those people love you. They're going to take care of you. But God was calling me to something different and sent me down in the ghetto of Memphis, Tennessee. The ghetto of Memphis, Tennessee. I thought I'd seen ghettos in my life, but I'd never seen one like that. I'm here to tell you. It was a struggle with people that couldn't read, a struggle with individuals who had been messed over by the system over and over and over again. And here I was with a master's degree and in a doctoral program with folks who hadn't finished high school, trying to pastor and lead them. And then the Lord went to work on me. Lord went to work on me. Let me strip you of yourself. Let me strip you of longing for where you used to be and thinking about what it would have been like had you stayed there. And so the Lord cut off, with the help of that Presbytery, 56% of the money coming to our new church development. Wow. I remember it was December 27, 1998. We had a house full of people, Christmas. Gail's family was there, my family was there, we were having a good time, and the letter came in the mail 2 days after Christmas. And when I opened it, I called Gail into the kitchen where I opened the letter and I showed it to her, and she read it and she said to me, "What are we going to do?" I said, "The first thing you're going to do is to go and tell your daddy to put that turkey back, because we're going to probably need that around March." I can't tell you till this day how the Lord continually drug us through that situation for 13 years. You wouldn't believe half of the stories of what God did in the midst of those 13 years. Getting ready to go before a committee on ministry, ready to close the church, not because they couldn't pay the salary. In fact, my salary had been cut. I had now become a tent maker, working odd jobs, common labor, used that old Jeep I had back in the days when they had telephone books and I had to deliver those and work and preach and do everything else. Gail took on 2 or 3 jobs and we worked through that whole situation. But I can't begin to tell you what the Lord did. And I used to hear all these miracle stories that people would give about what the Lord did. All this check that comes in the middle of the morning and all of that kind of math. And I can't tell you the truth. I never really believed it. I thought they were fabricated until one day, angry with the context that we were in, angry with how it was too many days in the month to pay the bills and not enough money. That Christmas tree that Gail dressed up one summer because we couldn't afford to, like we did in North Carolina, to cut down the tree. She took an old plant that I gave her that had grown up a little bit, and when Alicia and I came home, she had put Christmas lights on that plant. And Alicia said, "Mama, please take that down. Please don't keep that up." But the things we learned to do amid all of that, the telling of stories, the laughing, the joking, the having good time with each other, and learning how to love each other without the distractions, all happened in that 13-year period. But getting ready to go before the Committee on Ministry, we knew what the deal would be because we had gotten behind in the pension by about $13,000. Church just couldn't afford it. People couldn't read, couldn't write. People were working common labor and would move across town for 50 cents more on a job and to get a job. And here in the midst of all of this, a letter comes in the mail after I'm angry, after a Bible study that I only taught for 20 minutes. "Lord, what are you doing?" And I'm sick of this. And a letter comes in the mail that was written by somebody who knew our circumstance. And they gave 13,000, whatever the rest of that number was, down to the number that was sent to the Memphis Foundation to be delivered to the pension board of the church because they wanted to see us continue to faithfully do the work that Jesus had called us at the margins. I tell you this story because I haven't always been dressed up like this with a suit. I tell you this story because somebody in here has been through a hardship in their own lives. You haven't talked about it in a while. You haven't thought about it. You're in another space now. And some of you in here are going through this thing right now in your life, but you've done a good job of hiding it and not telling the story. And because of that, folks don't have a clue as to how good and how powerful God can be. And the point I'm making in sharing my story with you is that our stories are compelling about the ways by which God has moved us from one place to another, how we were assured of the power of God through the presence of Jesus in moments that we never thought possible. We've got to start telling our stories. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. I know what that song is about because I haven't forgotten the moments of struggle. And I think we have to reach back sometimes and remember those moments of struggles so that we can tell people who are going through it right now, I know what the Lord can do because the Lord has done it for me. That's a witness. And that's what we as Presbyterians have failed to do in any significant way over time, to get beyond all of the barriers that are in front of us and all of the facade and begin to tell the truth about Jesus and about our lives. because it is only then that we can really help people understand who are being deported and who are immigrants in this country and afraid, and those who have been in the church for a long time, going through surgeries and struggles in their lives and problems with their children, is to let them know we haven't been perfect. And God has covered our flaws with possibilities. And I want to suggest the last and final thing that at least I'm going to talk about today, and I certainly want to hear what it is you would have as questions. But yes, I don't know in recent days what you have read about the national church or what you have not about what is going on in Louisville. I am coming to this situation after about a year, just over a year of being engaged with our church in Louisville. We've been struggling for a long time, did not just start now. We have been struggling with, in a sense, a battle over whether we are a corporation or whether we are a church. And that might not be what people visibly see, but the question underneath is whether or not we understand ourselves to be a place that risks in the name of the Lord, or are we a place by which we accumulate more and more and more in our coffers, and at the end of the day, we brag and boast about what we have. You know, Jesus had some strange ways of saying things. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Jesus had some real strange ways of helping people understand what the gospel was about. Go give everything to the poor, and then come back and have a conversation with me. You know, it's an upside-down theology from this life of capitalism that we live. And we get trapped in this thing where we somehow or another believe that our institutions have to live a life that is in concert with a capitalistic culture and not counterculture to that whole cesspool of money mongering that's taking place in the United States today and has been for a while. Now, don't get me wrong, every one of us in here need to earn a living and need to have some money for a living. Our young people who are here today, I don't want to fool you. You're going to need some money to live too and to go to school and do a whole lot of other things. But when that becomes the center of defining who we are, when we talk about being Presbyterian, and the next statement is how many rich folk are in the Presbyterian church, and the statement after that is how many congressmen we have in Washington, D.C. that are Presbyterian. And we are bragging on all of these peripheral things that really are not grounded in the essence of Jesus' call to sacrifice on this side of heaven. We oftentimes find ourselves talking about something that is antithetical to God, because that's not the rudiment of our faith. Our faith is grounded in something that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as you love yourself. I got some neighbors, I'll be quite frank with you, I don't like loving them like I love myself. But who is my neighbor? That's the question the lawyer was raising. And Jesus, in essence, was saying, everyone who has been created by God Almighty is your neighbor. Not next door, but whoever you come in contact with. And I am convinced that this is the essential mission of the Church of Jesus Christ, to be reminded of that in this present day again, that there are no throwaway people, that there are no ministries of low status, that there are no spaces that we occupy that don't have relevance, but that wherever God's people are, God cares and God loves, and God calls us to love too. And to do it, as Jesus said, even at the risk of losing our own life, which Jesus did upon Calvary's cross. It is the recreation of a theological framing that has made us what we are, that caused John Calvin to question the legitimacy of the church as it was being practiced back in Geneva, Switzerland, and the founding of the Presbyterian Church based on a theological concept that we have a responsibility to be our brother's brother and our sister's sister. And I am convinced that we must return to that type of theology in this present day and going forward, while unashamedly proclaiming a gospel of our Lord and Savior. You know, this really is not hard work and hard to do when you think about it. It's just a matter of looking back over our life and even at our present moment and asking the question, what has the Lord done for me? And if we're thankful, we want to tell somebody. If we're excited, we want somebody else to know what the Lord has done for us. And if we really love the Lord, just like we love our children and our grandchildren, we want somebody to know how adorable God is, because the Lord has laid holy hands on us. Thank you for your time.